Hey, today is Monday, June the 17th, and it's great to see you again. Well, here at Redeemer this summer, we've been diving into the Old Testament book of Proverbs. This book of wisdom written by King Solomon, the wise King Solomon, whom God granted this gift of wisdom. And King Solomon was the wisest king to ever walk this earth. And in the book of Proverbs, we have generally these one, sometimes two verse, very short sayings. And really, the intention of Proverbs is to help us better live this life, to live a life well lived. Now, Proverbs was really originally intended for young people to read, and would consider it kind of an ancient textbook for young Israelite children to read, to learn how to live life. What does God want from them? And so kids would read this, they would memorize these 1 and 2 verse sayings, and hopefully their life would be better. However, for adults, it's also good to read. Sometimes we lose that good old-fashioned common sense wisdom. And when we follow that wisdom, more often than not, our lives are better. And so that is what Proverbs is all about. Now, yesterday here at Redeemer, we dove into pride and arrogance and humility and how the Bible really warns against being arrogant and sometimes being too proud. And, I think there's a fine line between being proud of our accomplishments and taking pride in one's work, and when that can lead to an arrogance. And I think it's a slippery slope sometimes, but the Bible certainly warns against this. But, most people think more highly of themselves than they should. And maybe you fall into this camp, but, I've seen all kinds of statistics that, people think they're better looking than they really are. People think that they're smarter than they really are. In fact, there was a pretty big study done, over 1,000 people, and this study showed that 65% of people rated themselves smarter than average. 65%. Now, average is 50%, and so you can see there's an imbalance on this. And men were even worse at this, guys. 71% of guys consider themselves smarter than average. And again, that just doesn't add up. Or driving. Now, I like to think of myself as a good driver. You probably do as well, because about 65% of people consider themselves excellent drivers. 65%. But when asked about their spouse and to rate their spouse's driving ability, 29% say their spouse is a good driver. Now you can see, we think of ourselves generally pretty highly. Not everybody falls into this trap, but most people think, I'm pretty good at what I do. And, me being a pastor, I can relate to this. Most pastors, when asked, do you give a good sermon on Sunday? I think, probably 9 out of 10 pastors would say, my preaching ability, it's really good. I'm a good preacher. And a month ago at the Synod Assembly, I love Bishop Moss said something along the lines of 50% of our pastors are below average. And I really laughed at that because, it's true. Half of us are better than average and half of us are below average. And so often, we struggle to truly analyze our own abilities. And that's not to tear us down. That's not to somehow make us feel worse about ourselves. But I think, sometimes a good reality check is good for ourselves. A pastor friend of mine once said that once he learned not to take himself so seriously, not to think of himself with such high esteem, once he figured that out, he thought he was a much better pastor, because he realized, God gave him certain abilities, not all the abilities in the world. He certainly wasn't the best pastor out there, but, he was doing what God enabled him to do. The Bible warns against too much pride. The Bible warns against being arrogant, because when we're filled with arrogance, when we puff ourselves up, that downfall will quickly come our way. Proverbs 26:12 says this: "Do you see a person proud in their own eyes? There is more hope for fools than for them." I love that. There's more hope for fools than the people that think of themselves too highly. Or Proverbs 18:12, "Before destruction, one's heart is arrogant, but humility goes before honor." Followers of Christ, we are called to live a humble life. We are called to live really a simple life. We're not called to think of ourselves as grand. We're not called to think of ourselves as special or something that, we're not truly what God created us to be. I think of Jesus, and he took the form of a servant. He took the lowly life. He shows us what it means to live a simple, humble life. And so we strive to do the same. We strive to follow Jesus' footsteps, being humble, not thinking too highly of ourselves, but going about our lives in service and dedication, striving to serve our fellow neighbors to the best of our abilities. Amen.